history of Bossier Parish, the steamboats and later the railroads influenced the movement of the populace. Communities like Fillmore and Bellevue suffered because they were not selected as depots when railroads came through. In 1884, the Vicksburg, Shreveport, and Pacific came through, and in 1888, the Cotton Belt. Likewise, Houghton, Benton, and Plain Dealing grew because they did become depots during that time. In 1909, the Louisiana and Arkansas Railroad was built and established Princeton as a depot. The first train passed through on November 2, 1909. The railroad caused the little community of Princeton to change from being just a quiet farming community to a bustling railroad depot community. On March 24, 1910, Mr. Burge of Minden decided to erect his store in Princeton. In an article from the Bossier Banner, the writer describes Princeton as having a store, a freight room, and several residences, but not a post office. The writer notes that things bear the appearances of being exceptionally busy during weekdays for a little flag station. He also writes that Mr. Burridge served as a ticket and freight agent for the L&A while running his store and raising chickens. By September of 1910, the first post office was indeed opened at Princeton, with Allie J. Burridge as postmaster. Bellevue Sawmill was one of Burridge's freight customers, shipping thousands of feet of lumber, such as pine cross ties and piles. The railroad depot went from being a little shack to a large and commodious depot. An express office was planned along with the promise of telegraph and telephone facilities. A new school building was constructed and filled with new desks and equipment. This did not mean a quality formal education was available to all children, however. In a rural area, many children are expected to stay home and farm as the seasons dictated. School attendance was only allowed when local agricultural work was not at its seasonal peak. This was especially true for African American children in Bossier Parish, many of whom were the children of sharecroppers. The Princeton High School can trace its beginnings back to early in 1900, on the estate of the late Reverend John Hawkins. The school term, as provided by the Bossier Parish School Board, at the time lasted only 3 months. Because of their interest and the felt need, parents of the children paid for an additional 1 or 2 months of schooling as they were able to, and extended the term. To provide a school building worthy of this effort, this community of students and their families combined with a like-minded community that was schooling their children similarly on the Ely farm, on land donated for school purposes by Mrs. Annie Ely. Ely Chapel had its beginnings in 1915 as a brush arbor on Lizzie Ely's land, which she provided to other members of Fillmore CME Church, which is now known as Wesley Chapel CME. They found it difficult to travel by wagon or foot to Fillmore for night services. The subsequent Ely Chapel moved to a location more accessible to automobiles in the 1940s and remained on the Fillmore circuit with Wesley CME Church until 1970, when it became a separate church. 2 years later, the congregation dedicated its present-day Princeton Road building. Together, these communities decided to make an application for the Rosenwald funds for a permanent, well-designed school. The Julius Rosenwald Fund was founded by CEO of Sears and Roebuck Company, Julius Rosenwald. He was the son of Jewish immigrants in Chicago and was a high school dropout who got his start in the clothing and retail industry working for his uncle. He gave large parts of his fortune to numerous types of charities, hospitals, museums, colleges, but his most focused effort was improving education for Black children in the South. Rosenwald chose to improve education by improving the physical setting in which it took place. He was inspired by Booker T. Washington's communication to him about schools that were similar to stables. Some of the school buildings were merely floorless shacks. The establishment of the Julius Rosenwald Fund in 1917 aimed to create or improve the buildings for the schools themselves. The Rosenwald Fund had a set school donation amount, and then white school boards and Black community members would split the remainder of the balance. Communities would raise and sell hogs and chickens. The profits from acres of cotton and monies collected during fundraising dinners all helped to reach the goal needed to open the school building. A permanent site was purchased in 1910, and a one-room frame building was erected. Gradually, the enrollment increased and the term was lengthened. Finally, in 1919, it opened its session as a Rosenwald school with 4 teachers, a 6-month learning term, and Mrs. L. M. Cash Harris was principal. Since 1940, the school was directed in its rapid growth under the principalship of Walter H. Martin. During these years, it grew from a 4-teacher elementary school to a school plant comprised of 2 modern brick classroom buildings for grades 1 through 12, a vocational agricultural building, a canning center, a music center, a visual aid room, 2 teachers' cottages, a 1,000-seat capacity gymnasium and auditorium, a well-lighted athletic field, and a 5,000-gallon water supply tower. Its curriculum included traditional school subjects, plus industrial arts, music, and business education. Under capable educational leadership, including a special class of supervisory teachers called Jeans Teachers, plus its staff and educators, Princeton High School became both an academic and sports powerhouse that yielded citizens who made indelible marks both professionally and athletically. Princeton was a musical powerhouse, too. Some Princeton alumni were among the world-famous Tiger Marching Band that played in the halftime show for the first ever Super Bowl held in Los Angeles in 1967. Bossier Parish's all-white school board put up all obstacles it possibly could to resist the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education ruling that made segregation unconstitutional. By 1970, all their tricks had run their course, and the school board was finally forced to show good faith effort to unify its separate school systems. So halfway during the 1969 to 1970 school year, Princeton High School, in its iteration as a blacks-only school, was closed. The school later reopened for a consolidated school for elementary and later middle school grades. For this video, we've gathered some former Princeton students to share their memories about the school. Princeton was such a beloved place for them and their community. Listen to what it was like for those students who had to leave their school halfway into their senior year and join the student body of formerly all-white Houghton High School.
I'm Margaret Rhodes Mims, and I'm a member of the class of 1969 for Princeton High School.
My name is Charles Jackson. I'm her classmate, class of 1969.
My name is Jimmy Roosley. I'm from the class of 1970.
My name is Jerry Allen, in the class of 1970, the last class.
And class of 1970, they went first semester up until Christmas there at Princeton. And a lot of the kids, when they started school in September, they went on to Houghton, but a lot of them didn't. They went back to Princeton. But after New Year's, when they came back to school, everybody had to leave Princeton and attend to Houghton. So they went 6 months at Princeton, and then finished at Houghton, and then the class of 1970, which is Roosley and Allen, they went back to Princeton and graduated. So therefore, my class was the last graduating class that did a whole year at Princeton and graduated.
Okay.
Of 69. But they was the last class to graduate there, but from Houghton.
Okay, but they did, Mr. Roosley, they did let you have the ceremony at Princeton?
Yes, we chose to go back and graduate from Princeton since we had put in all those years there from first grade all the way to our senior year. We want to go back and be the last class to graduate in that gymnasium.
No, but going to school was a break for me.
Yeah, so
Plus,
yeah.
we had a large family and we had a large farm, so we had to work there. And as I'm next to the youngest there, and then I have one brother, 3 sisters. No, yeah, 3 sisters, and then another brother. And then as the girls started graduating and getting married, so we quit farming, and that's when we got into sports.
Okay.
After we quit farming. But it was a break.
I also grew up on a farm, but the farming had ceased about the time I got ready to start school. We raised cotton and corn and peas and beans and watermelons and all that, but
Basically everything they
as I
raised.
Yes, cows, hogs. So when I got ready to start school, my grandfather had discontinued farming. So he was kind of in the retirement, you know, we had retired, so. The only thing I had to do sometime was on weekends, I had to cut up enough stove wood and enough firewood to last the entire week. And on weekends, when I'm out of school, then I would replenish everything.
When y'all were at the school, was the school heated that way as well? By wood, did you have to bring, I mean,
No.
I've read about some of the earlier years where they would
Yeah,
have to do
maybe
that.
the earlier years, that was way before my time.
And also, I would like to bring to everyone's attention there, when they, at the integration in '69, they went back to Princeton, there in '69 in September. And these guys here, class of 1970, was the state football champions.
Oh,
For
right.
Princeton.
First time in the history of the school that we had won the state championship in football. Before then, we were like maybe state runners-up or semifinalists or something like that, but we made it our goal our senior year to accomplish being state champs, and we did. But basically, all the kids that mostly played on the football team, some of them went over into basketball when the season was over. Some went from basketball to baseball and track.
Okay.
I was a 4-11. I played football, I played basketball, I played baseball and track. And I did it by mistake. One afternoon we had got out of practice and the track team was practicing, and the baseball team, we had completed our practice. So we decided we'll walk to the field and, you know, see what they were doing. And they were short of people. They wanted to see someone run against their 440-yard relay team. So we made up four guys, got 4 guys that had been practicing baseball, and we ran against the guys that were running track. And that's how I began to run track on weekends and play baseball during the week. I think if we had the opportunity to play baseball in 1970, when we transferred to Auburn, we had that same team coming back that was state runners-up the year before. We only lost one guy off our team, and his name was Roy Mills. He had graduated. So we had the whole team coming back.
Oh.
And our junior year, we were unstoppable. We ran up against Rodney Richardson that ended up playing with the Houston Astros that year, our junior year. And he's the one that stopped us in at state runners-up. He went on to win the state championship. And then that next year, he was playing with the Houston Astros. And you know, I found out that, you know, we were green and white. And I found out that we got that color from Bossier High School. Because when Princeton first evolved, we didn't have the access to uniforms and all of that. So we played in uniforms that was passed down to us from Bossier High School. Their color was green and white also. We had great kids as far as academics. We had science club. We had a great band that would be state runners-up every year in the competition in Baton Rouge. We had science fairs. So I figured and our football team would bring in a lot of spectators. It began to grow. The stadiums began to become filled on Friday nights. So a lot of our revenue was coming from the community. And because they would love to come see Princeton play on Friday nights, even if it was out of town.
Yes.
Oh,
They still followed us wherever we went. For the semifinals of for the state championship in 1969, we had to go to St. Martinville, south of here. And we played on Thanksgiving Day. I think we won that game about a minute and something left in the game, and that put us into the state championship, which the state championship was played at Princeton for the first time. The state championship was in North Louisiana. Before
Wow.
then, all the state championships was played in South Louisiana.
Oh,
So we had an opportunity to play in front of our home crowd, and it was packed.
Every year they would pick students in different subjects to go down to represent Princeton, different academic subjects. I'm sure math was one, maybe literature, science maybe,
Yeah.
but the only one I remember specifically was business.
because you represented.
Mr. Burson sent me 3 years in a row. I didn't go in the 9th grade, I went 10th, 11th, 12th grade. Now to get to Baton Rouge, first of all, for some reason or another, this is what's in my mind, that they only told you like the day before, told me like the day before. So they may have told the others earlier. But anyway, I've got to go home to tell my mama. She's got to have me back up at Princeton like 5 o'clock in the morning because we had no set-aside transportation. Teachers would volunteer and drive in their own vehicles. I specifically remember at least 2 of those times, maybe all 3. Miss Pierre was one, and Mr. Stone. But anyway, you got to meet up there at dark because they've got to drive all the way to Baton Rouge to get you down there in time enough to go in to wherever it is you had this set up place to take the test. And don't know why he picked me. In business of all things, that was my least favorite subject, But
A lot of our teachers came out of Southern, Grambling, Wiley College in Texas, but most of them was out of Southern, Grambling, and Wiley.
One thing I can say about the teachers at Princeton, they could see things in you that you didn't even know you had, and they would bring it out.
Oh, yeah.
One way or the other, they would get it out of you. Like she got picked to go. He saw something in her and said, "You can do it, and you will do it."
We're not gonna say what the other was.
And you wouldn't ask. You wouldn't ask. Do you want to do this? Teachers can do this at Princeton. You were told,
And you did it.
and you did it. Yep.
Yes.
You gonna give 100%.
Yes.
So if they see something in you, and they know you can do it, and they're gonna pick you to do it.
But, as far as academics, they were on us. It wasn't a thing about athletics. We had natural talent. I mean, you could take a guy and put him out there the first day, and he probably could run 110 flat. It wasn't a thing. We had talent as kids, because just like you say, we came from that background, farmers. We were running across the fields, we doing different stuff. But the teachers, they pushed for excellence academically. I remember one time we were going to Plain Dealey, and I went and told my teacher, I said, "Hey, we leaving today at 12 o'clock because the game starts in Plain Dealey at 1:30 or 2 o'clock that afternoon, and I'm asking for permission to leave." And she said, "Well, Rusley, I don't think you need to go." Why is that? Here I am, the ace pitcher, and I can't go. So I go tell Coach Mo, "Hey, Miss Jackson said I can't go." Really? So he go talks to Miss Jackson. Miss Jackson say, "Hey, I don't care whether he plays basketball, baseball, he's the king of the hill, or what. He's gonna get his lesson. There's gonna be a lot of games, Mr. Rusley, that you're not gonna be able to go to because you didn't turn in a report, you didn't pass the test, or you didn't do your assignment. So you better get it through your head. Academics come first, and then sports." So that gave me a wake-up call, that if I wanted to excel in athletics, then I was gonna have to excel in academics also. And that's what I did.
They got her.
One semester, fifth grade, Mr. Foster was out for whatever reason. I have no idea why he was out, but I had to do this class for one full, not a semester, 6-week grading period. And when I was in school, nobody never told me that I needed to take algebra if I wanted to go further than high school. But it just so happened this 6-week period, I didn't have algebra, I had general mathematics, which they gave you a touch of algebra for that 6-week period. But I would sit down there for the whole 6 weeks to babysit these kids is virtually what it was. And those 5th grade kids taught me how to play dominoes. That's what we did every day, play dominoes. I was good when I came out there because they taught me. I mean, I don't know where they learned it from, but I didn't know anything about dominoes until I went down there. But anyway, yes, I was down there. Oh, and I was saying that to say, because I was doing it for that 6 weeks that we had algebra stuff, when I came back, well, you still got to test for it, and I didn't do very well. I was upset. Miss Pierre was a teacher. I went and talked to her. She said, "But you didn't do the work." I said, "But Mr. Barton sent me down there." She didn't want to hear it. I still kept that bad grade. So when I finally went to college, algebra was my very last course to take to graduate. I kept running from it because I was scared of it. I had no background for it, and I could just see myself going there. It was my very last course to take before I graduated.
Like I say, academics was the thing. We had a lot of 4.0 students at Princeton.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of kids that had the smarts, but didn't have the funds to continue their education. We had kids that wanted to go to college, but their parents just didn't have the funds to send them to college, but they were smart. Mm-hmm. But they did well anyway.
So then you had to go for 6 months to Houghton. I imagine that was not nearly as the same experience.
It was rough for maybe the first month. It was rough. I can say this, that we wasn't really welcome there. I can say that. You had words that were spoke as you walked down the hall in the morning, but as we began to stay there, we began to get involved with different athletics and communication and talking with people. It became a little bit better. But yeah, it was rough. It was rough. Words were spoke to us, just in the hall in the morning, A lot of times I wouldn't even go in the hall until the bell sound for first class. I wouldn't go in the hall until it cleared, and then I go to my class. Because just as sure if you were standing in there waiting for it, you would hear all kinds of words being said to you and all that. So it was rough. First month or so, and I think I used sports as an escape. As people began to see me play sports, the camaraderie began to open. People start to open up. But when I left there, I went off to Southern. I had a football scholarship to Southern. And I came back, and Mr. Harlan was the principal at Houghton then. And Coach Moore was the assistant at the time. But Mr. Harlan and sometimes during the summer it would be raining, I couldn't work out the way I wanted to work out. And Mr. Harlan gave me the key to the gymnasium, and told me, say, they had a weight room, something that I wasn't used to at Princeton, having a weight room where you can go in and work out on the weights. You know, he gave me the key to it and told me, say, hey, this is your key. Nobody needs to know about this key but you and I. And he said, when it's raining, go unlock the door, go in and work out. They also had a room, in the weight room, they had an air conditioner in there. I go in and work in an air conditioner, you know, so, yep. Mr. Harlan, Mr. McCarthy, we were good friends, good friends. You know, speaking of the track team, how we carried the Harlan all the way to the state championship. The track team that was there before we integrated, when they found out that we was going to participate in track at Horton, all of them quit. They didn't want to run track with us. You had maybe 4 or 5 that defied what everybody else was doing and stayed on the track team. But the 100-yard dash, 220, 440-yard relay, 880 relay, all of those guys, they quit because they didn't want to compete. Because if I had to do over, I'll do it over. Those were some great times in my life attending Princeton High School. We, the meals that we ate every day were home-cooked meals. We ate home-cooked meatloaf. I mean, our food was home-cooked. We didn't eat pizza and pizza bites and hamburgers and all of that stuff. We didn't eat that. We ate home-cooked food. And it was so good till you had to open all the rooms and all the windows in the room after lunch because everybody fall asleep because you know, that comfort food, you know.
Right.
So yeah, we ate good. We ate good. We had some of the best cooks, I would say, in the North Louisiana. They were good, great cooks. But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed attending Princeton. I really did. If I had to do over, I'd do it again. Yeah, I would.
Ms. Margaret?
Just a couple of small memories. You're talking about the food. The thing I remember most is the smell of the soap when you wash your hands in the cafeteria and the rolls.
Oh, man.
They don't make them like that anymore.
Yeah, smell it when you see them.
That's right. They were really, really good. Also, they're talking about these girls playing basketball now. That was before I had any knowledge of what basketball was all about. We didn't have female sports, no track, no basketball, no softball, none of that. They didn't offer foreign languages. I told you that. I really, really wanted to learn Spanish, really, really bad. At the end of each year, you did a critique. And one of the questions would be, what would you want to see offered as a course that we don't have already? And I would always put a foreign language. The year after we graduated, they put one in Spanish. They brought Spanish to Princeton.
Actually, I think this is about the greatest thing as a young man that happened to me. Was going to school at Princeton, first through the 12th grade. And after